The series opens with one of our protagonists, Maggie Rhee, overlooking the island of Manhattan in a post-apocalyptic world. Several years after the breakout of a worldwide zombie pandemic, nature has taken over Manhattan. The zombies, referred to as walkers, shamble towards living humans and other creatures to eat them. They are attracted to noise and to scents, including the scent of humans. Humans that are bitten or scratched by walkers die and become walkers themselves. When the pandemic became out of control, the military blew up the bridges to the island to contain the chaos. Now it's home to well over 1 million walkers. Meanwhile, Maggie is clearly in distress over something and kills a walker with all the rage that's pent up inside her. After a few hours at a bar in a motel, Maggie drunkenly flirts with the bartender to get information out of him. She lies to him about her cabin getting overrun by walkers. Seduced by her, the bartender reveals there's a guy living at the motel that specializes in taking care of this type of problem. Maggie then searches the rooms to get more information on this guy, but she gets caught by the people running the motel before she can investigate more. They suspect she was sent by someone named Vasquez from down the road, but it's clear what Maggie's ulterior motive is. She came for a man named Negan, who was hiding out in the motel room with a young girl named Ginny. Deploying a blade from her boot, Maggie stabs the bar owner in the back and quickly subdues the 3 others. Right then, Negan enters the bar, drawn by the commotion. However, as soon as he sees Maggie, Negan flees, aided by the silent young girl, Ginny. Several years ago, Negan was the leader of a group named the Saviors. He used his authority and resources to subjugate other communities and gather tribute in exchange for protection against walkers. After a war against the militia, a group formed by his formerly subjugated communities, he was defeated. A new leader took charge of the Saviors, and Negan was sentenced to life imprisonment. Maggie was one of the 4 co-leaders of the militia. During the height of his powers as the leader of the Saviors, Negan had brutally murdered Maggie's husband, Glenn, which cemented her hatred for Negan. However, as the world kept on being ravaged by the zombie apocalypse, the two had to work together a few times for the greater good of their communities. In the present timeline, it has been a few years since the two have met each other. Currently, Maggie manages to catch Negan, and the two have a conversation. Negan's wanted by the marshals at New Babylon, a settlement not far from where they are currently stationed. He's got his face printed on wanted posters, and holds onto one such poster for safekeeping. No matter how much time has passed, Maggie and Negan are still at odds with one another. While Negan is still as playful and charismatic as ever, Maggie is cold as ice. He refers to Maggie as an old acquaintance to Ginny, while also mysteriously brushing off Maggie's inquiry about his wife Annie and their kid. Soon afterwards, Maggie tells Negan a tale about her old community named Hilltop. It got raided by a Manhattan-based group led by a man named the Croat. The group stole all their grain, took her kid Herschel Jr., and are coming back for more every month. It's revealed the Croat once followed Negan as a savior, and is still practicing the Savior's way of life to this day. Even Negan, who has a long history of violence, recalls the Croat being exceptionally insane. Thus, Negan and Maggie make a plan to help each other as long as Ginny gets to live at Hilltop. Outside New Babylon, 2 walkers are hung by their necks on display. Whatever this settlement is, they're big on law and order and punishing as they see fit. The settlement is on the way to Hilltop's relocation, which Maggie reminds Negan is partly his fault because he helped the Whisperers burn it down. After a while, Negan recites the story of how he met Ginny. About a year ago, marshals were snooping around a farm where Negan was working, and Ginny asked to travel alongside him. The girl hasn't spoken since finding her father as a walker, and it was clear that he was killed by humans. To keep her safe, Maggie has a Hilltop resident take Ginny back to their relocated settlement. That night, Marshals Pearlie Armstrong and Grits, along with Marshall in training Jono, search the motel and its bar for Negan. New Babylon seems to be a place where prohibition is at large, as the residents hide any signs of alcohol, gambling, and prostitution. It's revealed Negan's wanted for murdering 5 people in cold blood, and will be executed for his crimes. After some gruesome torture by the marshals, the owner tells Pearlie about Negan and Maggie's encounter. Despite her compliance, Pearlie still kills the owner for aiding and abetting. Outside, Pearlie finds a map which Maggie had accidentally dropped earlier. This helps him lead straight to Maggie and Negan in Manhattan. Meanwhile, Maggie has nightmares over Negan murdering her husband Glenn with a baseball bat, intersected with flashbacks of her teenage son Herschel being taken by the Croat. The two have their usual back and forth banter about killing each other and paying for their past sins. However, it ends between them. They both accept that they need each other to fix their unique problems. At the Hudson River, Maggie and Negan take Jono captive. They disagree on what to do with him. Maggie wants to use him as insurance, whereas Negan wants to kill him straight away. But, after a bit of discussion, they mutually agree to Maggie's idea. The city is awfully quiet for supposedly being infested with walkers, but the crew of Maggie, Jono, and Negan discovers where the dead have been hiding. Suddenly, walkers begin to rain from the top floors of the buildings. To add to their problems, a truck blasting music is leading a horde of walkers straight to Maggie and Negan's way. The three attempt to hide behind a mountain of garbage, but realize they've invaded the home of hundreds of angry roaches. Out of options, the three hide in a laundromat where Pearly and Grits, along with a dozen walkers or so, find them. The standoff ends with Negan and Maggie escaping, Jono getting shot by Pearly, and Grits joining the walker horde. As Maggie reckons with her actions conflicting with her morals, Negan seems intent on discovering how far Maggie will go to find her son. It's only a matter of time before they begin to look at each other like a mirror image, even if Maggie keeps reminding him that Negan's past will never be forgiven. After the scuffle at the laundromat, the two hide out in an abandoned building to collect themselves but are ambushed by a woman who may not be so friendly. Elsewhere in Manhattan, the Croat has a talk with a kidnapped Herschel. The captor tries to get Herschel to talk about Negan, but the teenager isn't budging. Before the Croat begins torturing Herschel, a young man covered in blood escapes from the Croat by zip line. The Croat cuts the rope, sending the victim to his death from 20 stories above. A few days later, an old woman, affectionately named Pigeon Lady, leads Maggie and Negan through the infected city, baiting them with their packs she stole. After making them climb up several floors in an elevator shaft, the duo have their first grounding with the zip lines set up across the city. While it's a piece of cake for Negan, Maggie struggles a bit to make her way to the other building. When Negan offers a hand of help, she refuses. Maggie would rather dangle in the air over a swarm of walkers than admit she needs help from Negan. Of all people, Ginny's not settling in well at Hilltop's new location. It's obvious she would rather be with Negan than a bunch of strangers, and is already suspecting something fishy might be going on. She notices a man peeping into a grain bin, which should be empty since the Croats people took all of theirs. Although Hilltop has been through some rough patches over the years, the new location is set up pretty nicely, all things considered. There are plenty of survivors getting their hands dirty to help the place thrive, and there's even a school that kids attend. Back in Manhattan, Pigeon Lady is snooping through Maggie and Negan's stuff. Maggie takes offense to it, whereas Negan couldn't care less. In fact, he's willing to make a trade with her. Even though she doesn't speak English, Esther warns the duo to avoid the building with smoke. It doesn't take a polyglot to know that the building means bad business. She takes Maggie and Negan to her people, which include the paranoid couple Amaya and Tommaso. They call Pigeon Lady by the name Esther. Maggie and Negan deduce that they're not with the Croats, and try to make a deal with them so they don't get shot by their strange drill weapon. Maggie lies and says that they're just passing through to get to a settlement in Canada, but Amaya calls her bluff. Maggie's good at many things, but lying has never been one of them. As another survivor, Luther, searches their bags, Maggie and Negan get a glimpse at Amaya and Tommaso's mini community. Despite being hunted down by the Croats people, it's not a bad setup. Back at New Hilltop, Nina tries to get Ginny to open up to the possibility of a new home. She's not entirely objected to it, but she's not thrilled about it either. In a flashback, a glimpse of Maggie's mother is revealed. She takes a stern but loving approach to reminding Herschel that skipping out on weapons training isn't going to fly. But being a teenager, Herschel gets easily irritated. He has a nasty attitude and is entirely insecure. Back to the present, Negan gives a lengthy monologue about his connection to the Croat. Long story short, Negan took in the Croat, who had been through some tough times, and he felt safe at the sanctuary. But Negan ended up just awakening the monster within, while also denying that he himself was a monster 24/7, and the Croat became the sanctuary's #1 torturer. The Croat once tortured a girl in an instance that Negan thought was taken too far. Negan tried to kill him for it but missed the shot. Now, the Croat is a loose cannon in Manhattan. Having lost Maggie and Negan, Pearly visits the home of her relative, Joel Armstrong. But when he gets there, he finds that the apartment has been abandoned for some time, and that Joel committed suicide. When he leaves the building, he gets stuck in one of the Croats' crafty traps. The Croats' marauders, called the Burazi, are raiding Amaya and Tommaso's community. Tommaso is ready to ditch Maggie and Negan, believing they drew the Burazi to them. Seeing they have no choice, Amaya and Tommaso set Maggie and Negan free. Maggie isn't quite ready to hit the road. She wants to confront the Burazi to get more information about her son's location. But that sort of gets thrown out the window once she sees how outnumbered she is. Unfortunately, Esther is murdered by a member of the Burazi. Negan gets revenge on Esther because he apparently had a soft spot for her. Or perhaps he'd rather release some steam that he's been suppressing on his trip with Maggie. He makes a show out of torturing and killing the Burazi member in front of others, shoving his head through the glass and gutting him over the balcony. The old Negan is still in there, and it only takes a small window to let him out. Nagi, meanwhile, doesn't seem too bothered by his over-the-top performance. That night, everyone regroups after losing their home to the Birazi. Nagi and Negan have found new allies and tell the truth about their real intentions in Manhattan. Amai and Tommaso are up for helping Nagi find the Croat and Herschel, but warn them that they'll probably die in the process. But another survivor has already found the Croat first. Pearly is taken by the Croat and his crew. The Croat reassures him that he's safe now, but he might be just as bad a liar as Maggie. The scene then shifts to a flashback of Negan begging Ginny to talk so they can communicate signals of danger. Negan's also in a cowboy hat, which feels out of character but too hilarious to not accept. Ginny lost her stuffed dinosaur toy, which will come into importance later in the episode. In the present day, Ginny arrives in Manhattan. Nagi, Negan, Amaya, Tommaso, and Luther are hiding in an alley where a deer is looking for food. Amaya rattles 2 antlers to catch the deer's attention before Tommaso kills it. As Luther skins and butchers the deer for dinner later, Amaya tells the story of how she and Tommaso survived the first few weeks of the outbreak. The military blew up the bridges and tunnels, leaving them in a death trap. They were doing fine until the Croat showed up trying to create the Sanctuary 2.0 in an attempt to keep all the natives safe. The Croat's a little confused, but he's got the spirit. As history has proven, anybody who doesn't join the Croat becomes targets because it's kill or be killed in his world. Elsewhere, Ginny eventually makes it across the Hudson River and heads into the heart of the city. The only way to get to the Croat is through what must be thousands of walkers surrounding a stadium, which is the Croat's base. They're drawn in by the sound of music blasting from Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade floats. Nagi and Negan figure that if Tommaso managed to escape the Croat's Alcatraz, then there must be a way in. Amaya is down for showing Maggie and Negan a way in, but Luther and Tommaso are hesitant. After all, they've lost a lot of people over the years, and their numbers are dwindling every time the Birazi finds them. Negan manages to get everyone on board with a speech about Alexandria and the other communities defeating the Saviors, without mentioning his part in all of it. Pearly is welcomed in handcuffs by the Croat in the stadium, which has some gruesome experiments. Dead bodies are shoved in vats of mysterious liquid that looks like a mad scientist's lab. Back at Maggie and Negan's temporary base, Tommaso draws out a map of the stadium and hidden tunnels in Penn Station that weren't blown to pieces. Maggie ends up spilling the beans that Negan and the Croat have a complicated history, which the rest are rightfully suspicious of. But Maggie defends Negan and proposes using him as bait to lure the Croat out into the open. Luther is the most apprehensive out of all of them. His people are being put at risk for a stranger, and he doesn't even think Herschel's alive. Admittedly, Luther does have a point that can't be argued against. Would Maggie or Negan do the same if it were the other way around? The Croat attempts to have a nice meal with Pearly, who isn't thrilled about being his prisoner. The Croat explains that before the apocalypse, he worked in alternative energy which has become useful today. When the dead bodies break down, they produce methane gas that can be pressured into liquid fuel. The Croat finds a maggot in his meat and kills his server. Maggie looks through a box of family photos that includes a drawing of Glenn and her father's watch. Negan interrupts her alone time to give her a baseball cap that she can gift Herschel when they reunite. Maggie admits that she and Herschel had a falling out before he was kidnapped, and that their relationship was on the brink of collapsing. Now the only memories that she has of him and everyone she ever loved are in a box, tucked away in a backpack. Negan also opens up about the whereabouts of his wife Annie and son Joshua. A few years ago, Annie was robbed and beaten in New Babylon. As revenge, Negan killed all 5 of the perpetrators, the same 5 people he's wanted for by New Babylon marshals. Being on the run after the incident was hard for Annie, so Negan sent her and Joshua on a wagon train to Missouri and stayed behind. Ginny finds herself surrounded by walkers in the city and drops her dinosaur toy. A lone survivor picks up the toy and puts it in her pack before Ginny can retrieve it. At night, the group gathers for dinner in a ceremonious fashion. Meanwhile, the Croat eggs on his people as he referees a zombie cage fight for Pearly. Some of his people inhale the methane produced from the dead body of one of their fallen comrades, and Pearly is forced to do the same. The gas causes a hallucinatory effect that basically gets him high, which isn't exactly the state of mind one should be in as they're about to fight a walker. While chained up, Pearly ends up winning the fight using sheer intuition and exceptional timing. He digs through the walker's stomach to find the key to the handcuffs, setting himself free until he has to fend off more walkers with just his shoe. The Croat later congratulates Pearly on putting on a good show. He reveals that at the onset of the outbreak, his family was killed in a post office while he was scavenging for food, which led to him meeting Negan. The Croat reads aloud a letter written by Pearly's brother who was begging for help, and likely on the brink of suicide. To get him to stop reading, Pearlie reveals that he's following Negan to bring him to justice. Luther demands that Negan and Maggie leave after finding the New Babylon wanted poster Negan's been proudly carrying around. Obviously, this leads to a disagreement that ends with Negan killing Luther. The lone survivor from before, whose name is revealed to be Inwood, greets Amaya and Tommaso with open arms. Maggie discovers that she has Ginny's dinosaur, and considers burning it as Ginny watches from afar. In the final flashback scene, Negan finds the dinosaur and teaches Ginny a whistling tone to use if she's ever in danger. Once again, the scene shifts to a flashback of Negan during his Sanctuary era. He's sat at a table where it appears a feast is occurring, evidence of the unequal class structure the Sanctuary was controlled by, and is drawing up a rough map of the building's defense system. One of his friends, Simon, warns Negan of a problem. Simon carefully suggests to Negan that he and other members of the Sanctuary have been saying the Croat has got to go for some time. But before putting his name in as a replacement, the Croat tells Negan that the girl confessed to being a spy sent by Ezekiel. Simon tells the Croat off for killing a kid, which is hilarious considering Simon ordered the deaths of multiple boys at Oceanside. Hypocrisy runs thick at the Sanctuary. Negan takes a good look at the dead girl, tied up against a chair and obviously having been tortured. In the present day, Luther has turned up missing. Negan keeps the fact that he killed Luther to himself for obvious reasons. He does suggest, however, that he probably took off. Tommaso agrees since Luther wasn't quiet about hating the plan. But Amy is still worried. Negan expresses to Maggie that he's concerned when he meets the Croat again. It'll just bring up memories of the past. Right on cue, a harmonica starts playing. It reminds Maggie of a time when a hilltop resident named Amos would play the harmonica non-stop, interrupting baby Herschel's sleep. When Amos left for a hunting expedition, she buried the harmonica in the ground and reminded Negan that he would have buried it somewhere way worse. The group heads down to the subway where walkers are trapped on the tracks. They make it to the Croat's hallway of torture rooms using Tommaso's secret route, but don't find Herschel there. It either means he's safe somewhere else, or his dead body is currently supplying the base's energy. Amaya makes a plan for Negan to bait the Croat out of the garage, while Maggie jump-starts a car to take him across the city. Meanwhile, the rest will kill all the Burazi. At the Croat's base, he teaches a young woman how to use a DVD player in the control center, likely because she was born after the outbreak. She seems intensely afraid of him, despite her saying otherwise. He reassures her that he's proud to have watched her grow up into a strong protector over the years, and shouldn't fear him. He gives her a piece of candy before hearing savior whistles from afar. He smiles at the thought of it being Negan as if he's a young boy awaiting his father's return. Maggie chases after Ginny into the stadium where the rest of the group, excluding Negan, meet her. None of the Burazi are there as intended because they're in the garage with the Croat and Negan. The girl in the control center puts the DVD in as she was taught, and it plays Proplicat See Zora in the stadium. The entrances to the stadium also begin to blow up, drawing in walkers from outside. The Croat saw the ambush coming from a mile away. He evacuates his people from the stadium as he hunts Negan down. Maggie's group fights off the walker herd as best they can but are losing fighters by the minute. The group slowly dwindles down to just Maggie, Ginny, Amaya, and a couple of others. They take shelter in the caged fighting pit as hundreds of walkers surround them. But as the prison era of The Walking Dead taught survivors, barbed wire doesn't hold dozens of formidable walkers for long. Maggie tells them to grab the padding off the edges of the fence, using them as shields in Captain America style. Tommaso somehow makes it out alive and leads Maggie, Ginny, and Emma into the hallways. The Croat is still on the chase, and the two finally reunite with weapons pointing at each other, of course. The Croat tries to make a truce with Negan but doesn't help himself by bringing up Lucille. Apparently, he knows all about the war the Saviors lost to Hilltop, Kingdom, and Alexandria, and insists that if he was there, he could have prevented the damage Simon caused. Because in the Croat's mind, Simon out of all people was the mastermind behind the war. There's an indication that there was a passive-aggressive feud between Simon and the Croat for Negan's attention. The Croat doesn't want to kill Negan for revenge. He wants to work with Negan to create a new sanctuary. The Croat believes that Negan is here for Pearlie, to finally put an end to New Babylon's bounty on his head. He tells Negan that to free Herschel, the two have to have a conversation, to extend his friendship. The Croat throws Pearlie over the balcony, but Negan, being a reformed man, catches him before Pearlie falls to his death. The Croat is surprised by Negan's heroics, completely unaware of Negan's redemption. In the final scene, Maggie and the others try to escape to the sewers, even though it's too dangerous with all the dead bodies down there. Regardless, it's probably a better death than being torn apart by walkers in a claustrophobic room. Elsewhere, Negan tries to make a new ally with Pearly as they now have a common enemy, but Pearly is a man of justice who doesn't let up. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on the notification, and leave 1,000 likes or 100 comments if you'd like us to continue part 2. Thank you.